Namaste.
Namaste.
Okay, welcome to our Tuesday night crowdcast satsang. What am I going to talk about? Let's see. I've got quite a few things cooking, so I have to sort through them.
We could ask the audience.
Yeah, but I think I got enough for
I'm
this
just
room.
curious if somebody else had a different idea.
Oh, okay.
Just you know
All
me.
right. I know you. So this weekend coming up, we're going to do an intensive, and the intensive is about awakening, the process of awakening. And if I look into the nature of the work that we're doing, and especially this universal work, it's about awakening to that which we've been not as awake to, right? So awakening is really a continuous process that we're all engaged in, is to waking up out of what is still sleeping, still distracted, still self-absorbed in its programming and conditioning. Coming into a more real, direct relationship with existence and with the truth of what we are, and learning to meet that in our own self, and then to meet that as we move into the manifestation of that which we awaken to, and the process of awakening and recognizing the characteristic of the awakening process, which is often bad news from the point of view of the unawakened part, right? So it's called the inconvenient truth, we could say. Awakening is a process of coming into relationship with the truth that's been there, but it's not really been directly addressed or considered. And of course, this is where we are with climate change. This is where we are in the politics in this country, and it's where we are in the world as it's seemingly wanting to go back to sleep. Because that's perhaps the greatest challenge of awakening, is to stay awake. What does it mean to be staying awake, right? What's that relationship with existence that keeps us awakening, engaged in the process of bringing something into existence that hasn't been seen, perceived, or experienced before, with more wholeness, with more relevance, with more sense of its purpose. See, that's the only way awakening will continue, is when you can get in touch with the purpose of your awakening. So I'm going to save some of this for the program, but I think when I look into the nature, that's called self-regulation. I'm learning. So this morning I finished reading, once again, this little blue book, and it's not the Gita, it's called the Constitution. And as I read this book, I am continuously enthralled and fascinated how this little book has been keeping this whole country together up until now. And that if it wasn't for this, all of us who were born in the United States would not have the freedoms, would not have the choices, would not have the privilege that we've taken for granted, the securities and the opportunities that we've just assumed as part of the opportunity of our lives. It is such a powerful statement relative to what mankind has been organized around, which is who's the strongest, who's the most shrewd or the richest or the most famous. Now, it's not to say that those inclinations aren't also part of this culture, but if there's anything to restrain that, if there's any alternative to that, you could say that what this is pointing to is an agreement among people where those who rule is at the consent of the ruled, of the people who are being ruled. And
It's
if
not the other way around.
did I say that wrong?
No,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just saying,
I
it
said it
feels
right.
like it's the other way around.
Well, this is, of course, a certain degree of this we carry with us, no matter whatever the structure we find ourselves in. There's always something to rebel against. We all are. Our privilege gives us more entitlement. Therefore, we are more likely to be rebellious than if we didn't have this much choice, this much entitlement. So, yes, it's created its own discord. It's created its own diversity, which is a lot of chaos and a lot of inefficiency built into this design. It doesn't mean this is the final, but what it does mean is that back there in 1776, a group of people came together and could agree on something that is literally a complete new paradigm back then for what was possible for mankind. And people died for this. People made choices and that cost blood and money and sacrifice for this. So this little book is now throughout the world recognized as a beacon, a light. Maybe not at this moment. We have to acknowledge, because we're definitely seeing a dimming of the light, but in terms of a possibility for mankind. And if I look at the nature of this work that I'm doing, that we're doing, it is also an intent that's being brought into existence and languaged and put into motion, which in order to manifest takes sacrifice, takes effort, takes time. But how they could start from scratch and create agreement that could last for hundreds of years is an attestament to an innate potential we all carry to bring into something into existence that's higher and truer than what has been able to come into existence before. So if you look at the nature of awakening, one part of this is awakening to our potential to bring into existence something that hasn't happened for us in our own lives and in others' lives up to now. So awaking up to what we are in existence is learning how to take responsibility for our purpose in existence. And always, anything created will always need to be periodically sent through the washing machine, driven through the car wash. It's going to need maintenance. It's going to need new ways by which the same thing can adapt to the changing times and to each era. And that's really what this country, and perhaps as a reflection of what's happening in the world, is going through, a transition. And it's my sense, if you just look at the politics, the transition is itself an awakening process. That things that were okay or allowed or ignored, or that we went into complicity with, or when we went into, retreat from facing, is now the consequences are becoming so poignant that something now must be done. Now, what is it that must be done? We don't know yet exactly. I mean, we're speaking to it right now. We're talking about it in this Peril purpose conversation, where the first thing to do is get in touch with the peril of staying asleep. And if awakening is anything, it's recognizing there's a peril. And that's where we are. Now, I was reading Sri Atmananda's book, Manifesting Divine, which those of you who haven't already listened to me speak of it, he wrote about 10 or 15 years ago, and he revealed this, and I was there when he revealed this in LA 2001. And as I said previously, it was perhaps the most breakout revelation that has ever come out of my teacher, and it's the one that planted a seed in me as an American living in India, where at the time I lived there for an additional 8 years from that point, off and on. So I was not fully recognizing its relevance for me, although I had one event that occurred not long after this revelation, where I was taken out of my body and I was like a dolphin swimming through the atmosphere. I'm feeling this extraordinary alive power, more awake than I'd ever known myself to be awake, swimming through the Earth atmosphere, going into outer space, and the thrill, the vastness of it. Went to the moon, and I saw the subtle plane kingdoms that are associated with the beings that are come from the moon source. There are beings associated with the sun source. I mean, they're all there in the middle kingdom. They're all beautiful, luxurious. For me, what I saw were like hillsides, colorful buildings like a Mediterranean, full of life, full of beauty, beautiful people. You know, this is the heaven plane to be traveled to. And then I came back to Earth, and I'm thrown into this conference room where there's a bunch of people wearing suits, guys, men mostly. And they are making a decision about, at that time it was Clinton and his impeachment process. And apparently impeachment proceedings had already come out of Congress, and this was the Senate deciding if they were actually going to head in impeachment. Somehow, I wasn't in touch with the news. I didn't know that this was what was happening. And it was something in me was just this, what are you doing? What a waste of time. This has nothing to do with anything that has any relevance except political agenda. And I went through all the people in the room and I was smashing them. I was just like destroying them. And then I said, wait a second, this could really hurt them. and I pulled back and I didn't know anything more than that. I came after a while, I came out of the state and forgot about it until I read the news. My teacher periodically would bring the Indian Times into the ashram, and I looked in our ashram, the Senate has decided not to go forward with impeachment. And I said, holy shit, that's what happened. So I realized that there was a connection between what was happening in this world and what was happening to the subtle worlds that I had been traveling through, and that I made a difference. And I asked my teacher, I said, why is that? And I went to my Sri Atmananda, and I said, first, how did that happen? Because I didn't have that kind of states before. And he says, well, I brought you along with me because you're an American. And because I needed to use your system to intervene in this situation. And that's what I had you do. So it pointed out something to me about the opportunity of what is available to us as awake spiritual beings, especially when it comes to preserving the order of the unfolding opportunity of consciousness for mankind. It's the maintenance of the world order. Without the maintenance, the structures of decay and corruption and distortion will come back in. Because there's always these titanic forces that are looking to bring forward the higher and those that are resisting and opposing the higher. And each one of us, every single human being, is a battlefield that is, these forces are working through. This battlefield becomes poignant when you take a stand for something greater than what has been acceptable before. because you will be attacked by the resisting or the opposing forces in your own personal self. It'll first say, oh, I can't do anything about that, not me. I can't take a chance, or it's not my problem, or it doesn't matter. That is not you. That is not you as an awakened being. That's an influence that's coming in and feeding into our lack of the unawakened parts of ourselves that does not yet know your own authority, does not yet know the difference you can make, even in the awakening process. So part of the awakening process is becoming aware that you make a difference and that your actions have consequences, including your lack of actions. Being able to take a stand for the reason you were born is why you were born. You were born to bring into existence, I assure you, at this time, during this specific time, you were brought into existence to serve and to support the unfolding of the opportunity of mankind that up until now, the United States was the leading light for, but now in many ways, the world is learning to have to come to responsibility for its own role to preserve the existing order. Unfortunately, there is not the same freedoms and the same alignment with the intention of this little book. They know of it, but only as a problem outside of themselves that they have to adjust to or work into if they want to have the same benefit as others, and so on, so forth. It's not been a self-created. Although there are some enlightening, awakened new systems that are coming up in the world right now, which probably we can benefit from, like in China, that might have some relevance in terms of our effectiveness, that the structure of what we've created needs a means to address crises in a way that can and will need to go beyond consensus. We're going to have to be willing to make some sacrifices in our freedoms and our choices around climate change. We're going to have some responsibility in those corporations whose organizing principle is still to make money for the shareholders rather than to be of any other use to society, except for those who can afford to own shares. We have to come to a recognition that the complete freedoms that we've been able to enjoy as a small country are no longer sustainable as we evolve into this much more interconnected world than we've known before. But we can't do it with just outward structures. It's not going to work. It's just going to be an imposition of a new order rather than something that can emerge out of the consciousness of truth itself. And what is the consciousness of truth itself? When you awake, one of the expressions of awakening is the interconnectivity of everything. The interrelatedness of all of us. That we're all one species on this one world and we're all struggling with the same issues. But more than that, there is this tangible sense of connecting to the all as one of the aspects of awakening. That sense of interconnectedness is true. And when you can realize our interconnectedness, when you can get an experiential sense of it, then you can recognize that each of us are nodes on this web. Each of us are interface of strings and strands of lived lives and possibilities. And we are the authority of our node, of our little 1/7.8 billionth of the matrix of existence. And if we're awake and we can know that, then from our node, we can create a vibration that can go throughout the entire matrix, that can begin shifting people out of their slumber into a greater awakening to what they are versus who they are, their purpose, and how to live that's aligned with that awakening process. So just a few things, just a few quotes from this chapter. Whenever any problem, this is from my teacher sharing this in Indian, right? Back in 2001, so it's a bit dated in terms of some of the references, but it's very relevant in its own way, to what we're talking about. Whenever any problem arises in the material plane, anywhere in the world, where do people look? At that time, to America. Any problem that is facing Earth, be it the environment, greenhouse effect, world hunger, world poverty, even war, scientific advancement, economic development, immediately which country comes to focus? America. All creativity, all riches, even charity, all the hidden positive force of our present civilization are resting on America. That is the subtle reason why it is a powerful country, a rich country. America holds the key to the extinction of civilization or the expansion of a new civilization. The dark forces know that if America is finished, the aspiration of man is finished with it. Due to this reason, America is being projected in many negative ways around the world, because they stand for a possibility that the forces of resistance, of opposition, of the other aspect of the titanic forces are saying, I need chaos, I need confusion, I need division, I need separation. You can't let these humans gather together for a positive purpose, otherwise we'll have no place. We won't be able to be on the stage of life. Just like NRA, if you can't have a gun, any threat to having a gun, no matter if it's machine guns or cannons, everybody should have the freedom to have one in their own home. Because any little thing could be an encroachment on our right to have guns so we can kill and destroy if we want to. It's the same insanity. And all of us carry a certain piece of this insanity. This piece that comes for existence and a piece that seeks to not exist. To live and to not live. Existence and non-existence. These forces are in all of us. Darkness and light. What is happening outwardly is the result of a hidden force active in the subtle plane. A Holocaust war in the subtle plane is approaching. Well, it's actually a year now. Anything that happens there will take its own time to manifest on the gross plane. What is building up is a war between two forces. One is the force of aspiration that wants to manifest the higher consciousness, and the other is the force of resistance that wants to maintain the status quo. This is not unique to America. That's not unique to this time. Why it is more poignant now is we're more awake. The world is more awake because since 1776, this opportunity, there's been other countries who have gone forward and carried this torch, but there's no comparable to the force and the resources and the capacities and the activation of the creative energies that the United States carries in terms of being able to have brought that into existence. See, because that's what's aligned with existence. Existence is seeking to expand itself always, to expand its ability to grow, to know, to experience, to learn, to evolve, and eventually to wake up. So when we're aligned, even at the material level, with the expansion of the material life, then we come into alignment with this greater truth as a natural byproduct of bringing the higher into our lives. So it's true for any country in this world, and it's true for this world at this time, that the fact that there is a battle now means we are, as a species, more awake than we have ever been. There is really nothing called America as such. It is a conscious manifestation on a geographical plane. It's a location on the planet of an aspiration for mankind. It represents a principle that is the unfolding principle of this era, of this time. It came, of course, to its fullness out of 2 world wars, as well as its own civil war, where its values were determined and tested to the challenge of returning into slavery or returning into an entrenched economic system that was based on the enslavement of human beings. It then, in World War I, where we came forward voluntarily to support a battlefield that was outside of our country, as a means of preserving the ideal, the opportunity for mankind, where we went there to die in vast numbers, where there was no direct benefit for us, other than that ideal, being called aspiring up to serve the world in a way that what we brought could be more established. So we had to fight it. What we were fighting? The past structures of mankind, the division and the domination through power, through control, through greed that was already there, through nationalization, through separate countries fighting out endlessly the vendettas of their parents and their parents and their parents, always seeking to come to resolution to the feuding that has no product but more feuding. It broke the cycle first in the First War, and that wasn't enough. Then it had to be in the Second War. And it was nationalism that came up again, fiercely, all throughout the world. Not just in Germany and Japan, in Italy, everywhere the world just started taking sides. And the same thing that happened outwardly in World War II, where it was war, the United States also came forward beyond what it would need to do for its own interest in order, without knowing it. Maybe a few people said, like Roosevelt, this is not a war we can ignore. He was inspired, he was lived by that aspiration that created this document in the first place. He was willing to take the stand, to sacrifice through blood and treasure for a better world. See, this hasn't existed before. It was always conquest. It was always getting more and more. Roman Empire was about more and more and more. More land, more control, more slaves, more wealth. It wasn't that. That's never happened. Not in any major power that's been in the world before. When you view it from this angle, Americans are out of the picture. Only Americanism remains, the principle of being able to take a stand for a higher possibility and bringing your wealth, your force, your power, your innovation, your intelligence to that into existence, vigorously. And in the process, creating opportunities for mankind, going to the moon, creating new technologies which did not seem to have a practical relevance from the immediacy, to leap ahead of the arc of the habit of humankind. You don't think the dark forces aren't pissed off? You don't think they are going to look for every entry point they can find to bring back, pull back, to stop where this wants to go? We all have this. The inertia in us is just the same as these dark forces are that are seeking to defeat the opportunity of mankind. We're all carrying it. We all have to recognize, where do we choose to go back to sleep and where we keep ourselves awakened. What is Americanism? Americanism is an aspiration of the whole mankind. Americanism is not identified with a person or a political strategy or government policy. There is really nothing called America as such. He's seeing this from the same plane I see it. This battlefield of Earth is a battlefield of titanic forces, always struggling to manifest a higher possibility than what occurred before, often being defeated as a necessary part of the cycle, then being recreated. But in this era, in this time, relative to known history, this is the highest we've been able to get up until now. This is the actualization of that possibility worldwide in a way that it's never been before, where people actually have something of an expectation called freedom, an expectation of choice, an expectation of a possibility for coming into life more fully than the life I was born into. That wasn't there before. There was no modeling. And even in the poorest parts of Africa, there is still, now through this little device, this phone, where people in abject poverty can see through someone else's phone this possibility for themselves that wasn't there before. It's a waking up process that the world has been engaged in our lifetime. And we've been part of that. The Americanism is not identified with a person or a political strategy or government policy. But because there is limitation on the part of mankind in comprehending what is happening on the gross plane, people are thinking that is a George Bush or a Donald Trump or a Saddam Hussein or a Bin Laden or whoever else is out there. They're just instruments. They're just means by which the resistance and the dark forces can seek to bring back coal, bring back oil consumption, get rid of these electric cars, get rid of this, this worldwide interconnected economic system where we all are tangibly benefited by everyone being included, even if there are some temporary sacrifices from the more affluent for those who are less affluent, so that there is greater equal possibility for mankind rather than just us. This reclaiming, this thing that's going on right now is this is the dark forces. It's not any one individual. It's because they found an entry point, maybe through the Islamic tradition, and they blew up the two trade towers. And part of it is because there are forces of darkness that have been at work all along, corroding the possibility that America brought, with greed, with power, with control, with arrogance, distorting through each of them, creating self-interest, egoisms in levels that have never been on the planet before, entitlements that have never been on the planet before. The inequalities that we're experiencing in this age is a reflection of the distortion of the dark forces that have been working through all of Americans and all who are similar in the world, who have come into the opportunity, and instead of sharing it, they're hoarding it, acquiring it for their own self-interest. Not even for their own country's self-interest often anymore. That's why there's chaos. Why is this happening? Why are people thinking our enemy is certain people, the Republican Party and Donald Trump? It's because we don't understand the forces that are at work or have been at work. We've been asleep to them. We haven't been awake to the fact that this is always the peril that is confronting the unfolding opportunity of the species. And if we stay asleep to that, then those forces will gain, claim, lay claim, and distort for their own purposes that which is here to serve all of mankind. Look at the force that is trying to manifest and the force that is trying to resist it. And look where the force is vigorous. Where is the force of liberty? Where is the force of aspiration most powerful? It is America. It's now other parts of the world. Back then it was less so. That is why America is targeted. Not because Americans are egoistic, not because Americans are greedy. No, that is the outer reason. The real reason why is the target of undivine forces. The reason why it is the target of undivine forces, because the collective aspiration of mankind is trying to leap into a new level. And these forces are using America as a base and as a lever to resist and prevent this from happening. If America is finished, either because its economy collapses or its military strength is neutralized or its young generation is immobilized by taking drugs and so on, then what will remain is the realm of Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, the blind, uncontrolled attachments, the self-interest, family structures, return to the mafia. Blind, uncontrolled attachment and its offspring, unbridled egoism. The opposing forces are working hard so that the collective aspiration can be totally banished, or the leap in consciousness can be delayed or postponed. America can be finished without firing a shot. You simply destroy one whole generation. When psychic beings are frustrated, they will be content to just vegetate, or they may even lose the very aspiration to live. One generation. All it takes is one generation. What's that, 20 years? 25? And the entire momentum that has brought us to this point could be defeated. See, we're in the midst of this peril. This has been going on for a decade at least, maybe two. 85% of the global warming has occurred in the last 30 years. So that's probably where we can look. It's the unbridled greed, unbridled ambition, without full responsibility. Without responsibility. Take what I can get away with. So what are the resources available to us? Well, we have to look at the nature of truth consciousness. We have to look at what is truth. See, without truth, we have nothing. Without truth, we'll have chaos, because there will be no apparent consequences for actions or choices. You can't learn without consequences. So having laws, is an expression of truth, right? It's not personal. Gravity is not personal. No matter who you are, you're all subject to the law of gravity. So there are some laws, and these laws were formulated as best it could be created at the time, so that truth could not be defeated by ignorance and darkness and untruth. So in our society, this little book is an expression of truth consciousness. The Constitution is the rule of law that has given a reference point for the collective consciousness of this country, America, but also for other countries who are setting an intent to some variation of this, where there is the recognition of the equality of man, of inherent self-evident truths that are available to all mankind, that we are equal. I can't remember the rest of liberty and the pursuit of happiness. This self-evident truth is not so self-evident if you don't have a structure for bringing it forward in a world where, if left to itself, will destroy itself, will return into non-existence. Just like us in our own life, when we take a positive action and we get it into our life, the problem is keeping it up. You start a daily meditation practice. At first, maybe it's good, or maybe it's difficult, but after a while it's good. But then keeping it up requires a structure. It requires the application of effort, persistently over time, so that what that practice can bring into your life has a chance to flower, to grow. It becomes the scaffolding in which the purpose that had you want to meditate in the first place has enough authority that it becomes the motive, rather than that which resists and opposed and wants to return to the same old order. So the nature of truth in this dimension is law, the laws. If we're not honoring the laws, then we are weakening the structure. The laws may be needing refinement, always needing refinement, but without laws, you have no order. Without order, you have no basis by which the consciousness could come out of chaos and find the truth of what it is. So what's another expression of truth consciousness? The facts. What's really happening? What's so? Yes, some of these facts are subjective, but some of these facts are tangible, evidential, things that you could demonstrate and prove. Science has shown that when you follow the facts, you can come up with the solutions of mankind's material existence that never existed before. You can find electricity, you can create electric motors, you can invent new ways to building, you can bring, thank you dear, new healing technologies to mankind so we can live more full, more happy, more long lives, so that the opportunity of our lives can go travel more distance than in our brutish previous history. So we stand up to power, we stand up to inequality, we stand up to greed with facts. And if we're not believing facts, then we're in trouble. If we're not honoring the law, the structure, we're in trouble. When there becomes a lawlessness, then it's like the first chapter of the Gita, where Arjuna said, "Oh my God, if we have this war, it'll all go to shit. Traditional custom and rights will all fall away. The women will become corrupt, and what will become of mankind?" It's a similar time. We're in a similar time, and that's why he points to Duryodhana and the blind king, because that's the battlefield. And at this time, when the Gita was written, this other blue book, well, a little blue book, notice two blue books, other blue book, it's warning about what to do in times like these. It's talking about the predicament. And it's talking how to wake up to it and to stay awake and to keep waking up to what it means to be truth in existence. Okay, how am I doing? We got 15 minutes.
No. No, it's meditation.
Okay. So an inspiration came to me. I thought we would schedule a program in Washington, D.C., within 30 miles of the Capitol, for 3 or 4 days, 30 people. And do an intervention. Rent a hotel room. And just invite everybody you can to join us for those 3 or 4 days, and we will do an intervention.
2.
2 interventions?
No, we're going to do 2 days. We're not doing 4 days of intervention.
All right, well, let's see.
We'll talk about it. We'll have to involve Elizabeth, though.
Because I know what's possible. I know what I am. I know what we could do. I haven't spent a lot of time focusing on this kind of middle intermediary zone, but I know that with your collaboration, we could shift things, and then that would be able to see what more needs to be done. So it's my sense, if we follow the intuition of it, we'll be there at the right time, right place. So, since this is the nature of the unfolding of the work, and since all of you who are listening to this and who are here in this room know the power in your own personal life and in those you are working with, what it is we're bringing, let's combine and see what happens. I often travel, when we meditate together, I often travel into the subtle dimension, and I locate people or countries or locations in the world which I sense needs an intervention, comes from whatever organizational principle of my ego that remains while I'm up there, and it directs this force, Sat force, to it. So I don't know how, I don't track the measurement, I don't have a means of measuring it, but I do know that with my teacher we did a number of interventions in the Middle East, and there was a dramatic shift within 3 days of the intervention.
Right. We didn't go to the Middle East to do it.
Yeah, no, but from the subtle world.
Right.
But one thing that is clearer is that the physicality of this force is tangible in my system. I'm not just a transcendent being, I'm an embodied expression of true consciousness. And that being in a physical location is going to make a difference. So let's see what happens. We'll see. I'll have to negotiate.
Now we just have to figure out when.
When and
That's
where.
the bigger issue.
Yeah, space and time.
Don't think you want to be there in the summer.
And then we track cause and effect. Let's see how maybe this can be expanded. Okay.
We have some DC people here. They can all help.
I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. That's why we're all here.
DC person. No. Nope. Just Saraswati and Elizabeth.
Okay, now you notice that jazz, that energy came into the room? Huh? Because all we want to do is manifest, right? All we want to do is step in and play a part, right? It's also truth. That's also truth. What does awakening want to do? Awaken. It wants to be an awakener, to create awakening. Okay. All right, so that's our message for tonight. And we'll see what happens from here. All right, so we'll finish with a meditation, and then we're going to have a 10-minute meditation. You happy?
10 minutes?
10 minutes.
All right.
That's good
It's
enough.
better than none.
You can do a lot with 10 minutes. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat Shri. All glory to Gurudev, and may truth manifest. Namaste.